The film begins with John Kramer / Jigsaw, Tobin Bell, undergoing cancer therapy. He joins a support group and is advised by his doctor to retire from his job because he only has about a year to live. Later, John contacts Peterson's daughter, Cecilia, Synnøve Makodi Lund, who directs him to her clinic in Mexico. John visits Mexico and meets Diego, Joshua Okamoto, a cab driver. A vehicle stops the taxi, and two armed guys come out and order John out. He informs them who he is, and they take him to the clinic, which looks to be in a magnificent home. He encounters Gabriella, Renata Vaca, a young lady who believes Cecilia's therapy cured her. John then meets Cecilia, who walks him through the surgical procedure. She introduces John to her assistants, Mateo, Octavio Hinojosa, and Valentina, Paulette Hernandez. The night before the procedure, John wakes up in the middle of the night to find a neighbor youngster, Carlos, George Briso, attempting to repair his bike. John assists him and is kind to the youngster. John observes a janitor, Isam Byom-hyun Lee, rifling through an old patient's things. John then imagines a trap for the caretaker, with two vacuums hooked to his eyes, and another gadget connected to his fingers on his right hand. The caretaker must stop the trap from sucking out his eyeballs, but every step he makes breaks a finger off his hand. He looks to surrender and have his eyeballs sucked out. Later, John goes through the surgery, which Cecilia predicts would cause him to drift in and out of consciousness. The procedure appears to have gone well, and John informs Cecilia that she will receive the remainder of her cash later. Before departing, John goes at a liquor shop to buy a bottle of tequila for Gabriella, as a thank you present. When he returns to the clinic, he finds it deserted. At Truth, the custodian notices John and leaves the patient's stuff alone. Later, John meets Henry Kessler, Michael Beach, a member of his support group. Previously, Henry claimed to have stage 4 pancreatic cancer, but he shows John a surgical scar and claims to have had an experimental technique that healed him. Henry informs John about Dr. Finn Pedersen, Donald Gordon, the man who initiated the surgery. John tracks down Diego, who was posing as the doctor doing the surgery. He traps him in a trap in which he must cut out 2 pipe bombs wired into his arms. Diego unwillingly begins cutting into his arms and painfully pulls his skin off. But he is successful in removing the bombs before they explode, and he survives. John congratulates him and then demands that Diego hand up the remaining information. He comes down to the operating room, only to discover proof that the gang falsified the procedure and plundered him of his money, and they never even operated on him. He then violently breaks the bottle and contacts one of his resources to begin planning his retribution. Valentina works as a prostitute outside of their scheme. She attempts to con a man out of money, and he nearly rapes her until Amanda Young, Shawnee Smith, dressed as a pig, arrives to knock out the rapist and capture Valentina. Gabriella is thereafter depicted as a drug addict, with Mateo as her dealer. They are both knocked out and taken. Finally, Cecilia is at home when she notices an intruder on the roof via her security cameras, and despite her attempts to flee, she is apprehended as well. The 4 con artists awaken confined in a chamber. John and Amanda confront them about their bogus enterprise, in which they have defrauded scores of dying individuals out of all they had. Cecilia attempts to get out of it by claiming that John's case was different, but he ate, she's still lying. He then starts his game. Valentina is trapped in a trap with a wire saw in front of her neck and a box with a giggly saw next to her. She is instructed to chop off her right leg and extract enough bone marrow to set herself free. Valentina proceeds to cut into her leg, despite the pain, and begins to extract her marrow, but the cup does not fill up in time, and she is beheaded. The remaining 3 individuals see a phone on a cart in the center of the room. Cecilia slashes Valentina's body and extracts her intestines to use as a rope to pull the carriage towards them. Amanda strikes Cecilia and snatches the phone as she tries to call for help. Outside, another patient called Parker Sears, Stephen Brand, whom John had met before after another bogus procedure, arrives with a revolver and demands that Cecilia return his money. Amanda punches him out and steals his revolver. John states that he can assist Parker in getting his money back as long as he follows their terms. Despite John's desire for Gabriella to be the next victim, Amanda sympathizes with her since she, too, is a recovering drug user. Mateo is the one who goes next. His plan is to compel him to remove brain matter from his head and place it in a jar of enzymes. When the substance has completely disintegrated, a key will appear to release him. Mateo slashes his skull open in an attempt to relieve the pain. He, too, fails to finish his assignment on time, and a mask closes around his head, burning him to death. Gabriella's trap follows. One arm and one leg are dangling from the ceiling. She is warned that she must shatter her limbs with a sledgehammer to liberate herself, or a radiation machine would burn her alive. Gabriella grudgingly crushes the bones in her hand and foot, releasing herself but resulting severe facial burns. John and Amanda rescue Parker before going on to Cecilia, only to realize too late that Parker is Cecilia's lover and works for her. She dialed his number and requested that he come to her aid. Parker threatens John and Amanda with a pistol and compels them to shackle themselves. When John says Gabriella needs to go to the hospital, Cecilia steps on her neck and fractures it, claiming she doesn't want any loose ends. She also tells John she knew he was Jigsaw and finds it ironic that a serial killer is trying to punish her. Carlos is outside, kicking a football. Cecilia drags him in and chains him to a seesaw trap with John, but John warns him in Spanish not to pull the lever. Cecilia and Parker set off the trap, which drowns John and Carlos in blood. John pushes his lever, causing the blood to merely begin to drown him. Meanwhile, Cecilia and Parker return to the office to collect their funds. However, when Cecilia tugs on a bag containing the alleged money, she sets a 10-minute timer. Then Hello Zepp starts playing as John and Carlos' trap is disabled. According to flashbacks, John knew Parker was in on the con all along, so he and Amanda planned for him to show up and do what he did. The bag includes documentation indicating withdrawals from Cecilia's accounts, and it arrives just as toxic gas begins to fill the room while Cecilia and Parker are confined in. They both struggle to find a way to breathe while the gas burns their flesh. To rescue herself, Cecilia stabs Parker to death, exactly as John and Amanda told him she would. Cecilia pops her head out and lives as the countdown expires, but she can only shout out to John in vain as she stays trapped in the chamber with no way to call for aid. As it is already dawn, John and Amanda lead Carlos outdoors. John then delivers Carlos all of the money he recovered from Cecilia's swindle. Midway through the credits, John had located Henry with the assistance of Detective Mark Hoffman, Costas Mandealer. Henry no longer had his phony surgical scar, so John assumed he was in on the deception. "I want to play a game," John says, activating a trap on Henry's torso that will cut into his stomach. Henry's only option is to scream in horror,